Prepare for takeoff, please.
It's the Shipping Pod.
Hello and welcome to the Shipping Pod. I am your host, Tim Dooner, here today with a very special guest, Shark Tank deal maker, inventor, entrepreneur, and even a nurse. It's Melissa Gersin, CEO and founder of Tranquilo.
Hi, everyone.
Did I say that correctly? Is it Tranquilo?
So actually the name, Tranquilo, it kind of depends on which language you're trying to speak or how you want to pronounce it.
Yeah.
It's spelled the same in several different languages, Portuguese and Spanish, which have very different pronunciations, and very similar spellings in both French and Italian. So people can pronounce it however they like tomato, tranquilo.
Well, your company has been on my radar for quite some time. I first contacted you, I believe it was in January of last year. I was working with a freight forwarding company, and I'd seen you on, I believe it was one of the startup websites. It was just letting you know who's working on things, and I had a baby at the time, and I said, wow, I wish this mat was out when Ronan was an infant. But I contacted you, I reached out to you. You've been a great person to work with and to see your continued success, and you've grown quite rapidly, even since I think the last time we went to something was probably May of last year, that port tour, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but then since then, things started to skyrocket.
Yeah.
But we'll kind of we'll get to there, but your product is you could probably best describe it. So what is a Tranquilo mat?
Sure. So a Tranquilo mat is a portable soothing mat that calms crying babies by mimicking the sound and motion that they experience inside the womb. So babies are suspended in amniotic fluid, and their mom's heartbeat is about as loud as a vacuum cleaner, or 80 to 90 decibels. So they miss that kind of constant motion and constant sound. And so the mat is flexible mat, imagine like a yoga mat with some vibrations and sounds associated with it. So you can use it anywhere that baby goes. So baby goes everywhere these days, and they cry everywhere.
The age-old baby trick is to put your kid in the car and go for a ride. It'll put them to sleep and soothe them. Is it similar to what it's mimicking? Is that mimicking the womb too? Same kind of theory?
Yeah, so when you're in a car, the baby's got constant motion, you've got the rev of the engine, you've got passing car noise, you've got kind of the sound of the wind passing through the car. So it's very similar. It's actually based off of the 5 S's by Harvey Karp, a famous pediatrician. He wrote the book, The Happiest Baby on the Block, and he believes that he, lays out in this 250 plus page book, the science behind the 5 S's. So constant motion and constant sound, 2 of the things that babies do miss from the womb. Swaddling is another popular one that most parents have heard of, and the other is sucking. Obviously, babies get their nutrients and pacifiers from sucking, and then the last one is side or stomach lying, which obviously is never safe for sleep, but is another technique to get babies to stop crying.
And neither of those last 2 work for my kids. They don't like pacifiers at all. Neither like swaddling. They actually like to kind of be free and loose and sprawl about, or else they get really cranky. So I think this mat might be a godsend for at least my family. The difference between an entrepreneur and someone with an idea is an entrepreneur actually goes and acts on whatever that crazy idea is, right? So how did you come up with this? And what was the impetus to make you decide, I'm going to start putting money into this and I'm actually going to develop a prototype?
Yeah, so I actually had the idea, like most people. I mentioned it to a few people. I was actually at work, so I mentioned it to some coworkers and, some friends, some family, and everyone just kind of did that. That's nice. Or that's a good idea, but didn't go anywhere. And then, I kind of just left it at that. And then somebody would be like, hey, remember that idea? There's a thing at the hospital. You're supposed to offer it to them, because you're working here at the time that happens. So you should talk to their intellectual property department and, apply and see if they're interested in working with you on that. So I did that, and then heard back from somebody, not really a good idea. We're not interested. And I was like, okay. Forgot about it. A couple months later, it would come up again, and it ended up becoming this idea that would not leave me alone. Like, just kept knocking kind of like on the back of my brain, like, let me out, I'm good, I'm a good idea. And I honestly just kept kind of working at it slowly but surely at first, because it was the only way that I could be left alone. So I would work on it, and it would stop. I would stop thinking about it, so I could, go back to work, or I could, enjoy my friends on the weekend or whatnot. So, but it was a very slow start, and I definitely would, like I said, just like pick it up for a bit, maybe a couple days, and work on it, and then put it down. A couple months later, I would pick it back up again because it was bugging me. So I was just doing it that way, and then ultimately ended up deciding to build some prototypes. So went to Radio Shack, cut apart various, things around the house, just mostly curiosity to see like, okay, well, I have this idea, but is it actually going to work? And then somebody suggested I try it on a baby, and I was like, but I soldered this together myself. This is probably not going to...
Did you go to school for engineering? Had you picked up a soldering gun before, or were you just like, I hope I don't get electrocuted, I'm going to start putting motors together and vibrating sensors?
I did not go to school for engineering, but when I do look back on my history, I hung out with, I was part of that dorky crowd in high school, and I think it was of my male friends in high school, 3 of the 4 became engineers, and the other one became a medical doctor. Certainly I remember in high school, like, they were soldering things together, building things, taking things apart in their parents' basement. And, when you're a teenager, you just kind of hang out together. So you're like in that vicinity. And I think I had soldered something before, but I didn't really remember it. I mean, it's kind of like an advanced hot glue gun. So it was just a lot of, thank God for Google and YouTube, and just like kind of taught myself. And even the people at Radio Shack were like, sure, just do this, this, and this. But yeah, and I do have an uncle who's an engineer who I spoke to briefly, but he wasn't physically present when I was doing any of this. It was just a lot of, like I said, curiosity, like, well, if I try that, will this happen? And obviously, when you solder things together, you don't want to put active electricity through it. So I knew that unless I had it plugged into a wall or I had batteries in it, I wasn't going to electrocute myself.
Sure. And so for your initial test subjects too, so you build the prototype, you were a paternity nurse, correct?
Correct.
At the time? So were you using it at work, or did you have to borrow babies from friends?
Yeah, so essentially I had to really keep this outside of work because, like I said, the hospital wasn't interested in working on it with me. And it's really against kind of patient privacy violations to utilize your workplace for other business. So I just kind of asked around or asked friends, and I was surprised that people let me use their babies as kind of test subjects. I was like, I made this thing. It might work, but I also soldered it myself, and I really don't know if it's safe in any way. And they're like, sure, not a problem. Put my kid on it.
Wait, it'll stop crying? Okay, we'll try.
Yeah, so I was a little bit surprised at that. And one of the real moments was I had a friend invite me over to her mommy and me group. So there were several babies, like 4 or 5 different babies in the same setting. And we just tried it in a bunch of different scenarios. And we had one baby who hated his car seat, which is actually unusual because most kids love being in the car. Yeah. And so, but the mother was like, the minute you put him in it, he screams bloody murder. And so she was like, so we tried that. We put him in the car seat, and sure enough, like just his butt hitting the seat, he just started to wail and wail. And then I put the mat on and I placed it on him, and he stopped instantly. And the mother was like, I will pay you $100 for that product right now. Like, I need to take that home. And unfortunately, of the 3 prototypes that I had, that was the only one that was the proper size for the car seat. And it was also the only one that had issues with overheating because I soldered it myself and I didn't really know how circuitry worked. So I definitely couldn't give her that particular sample. But it was like, okay, if this woman's going to literally go to the ATM and hand me $100 for this right now, I think I might be onto something. So yeah.
Your initial product, you made it by hand. Your friends wanted to buy it from your friend. How many did you make by hand before you decided, I got to have a factory do this, or I have to have this sourced?
Yeah, so I only made 3 or 4 samples by hand, and then I had that experience with the mom who wanted to buy it from me, and I decided, okay, I really need to find somebody to manufacture it. And that was like a big speed bump. I had trouble thinking outside of the box. Like, how does somebody who's never manufactured anything know where to find a manufacturer? And, I spoke to my uncle, and everyone was kind of like, oh, China, but because it's small electronics, but how? Who? Like, do you just, we all know that people rip off products, like just kind of steal ideas in China. And so I was like, you don't just want to go, call up anybody, because who knows what will happen. So I think it was one day I was at a party, just like a friend, having a few friends over, and I met somebody and was like, hey, my name's Melissa. What's your name? What do you do? And they imported gifts from China, like kind of t-shirts and, mugs and things like that with kitschy sayings. And so I was like, really, that's interesting. We got to talking, and they gave a reference to somebody who was an agent over there that could help source. And then I had to make a few more samples to send it to that person who, looked it over and ultimately was like, yeah, I think we can help you. And that was when they helped me with the sourcing and finding the factory. So
you got out, you sourced it from the factory. So you didn't go to China for this, though. They were sending samples back and forth to you?
Yeah, so that whole process, the initial process of just sending it to the agent took probably about 6 months of back and forth. And then from there, it took almost a year to find a factory. And I think we went through 4 versions of samples. We actually had found a factory that we thought we were going to work with. We sent everything off for safety testing because this is a children's product. So that was another, set of things I had to learn about, was like, oh yeah, you have to learn about safety testing. What does your product have to be tested to, etc. So I was learning about that while I was learning about how to make a product and import a product and all sorts of things. But anyway, we sent off those last samples, and we were in the middle of kind of a crowdfund campaign, and we had orders, probably about 50 orders or something like that.
So you ran into a few snags overseas with your initial sample order.
Yeah, so the first factory we were working with, we sent everything off for safety testing and found out it didn't pass the testing that we were promised the standards the product would meet. So we knew we couldn't work with that factory, and we ultimately had to find a new factory quickly, because we had about, at that time, 50 orders. By the time it was all said and done, found the new factory, had a what's called white sample, or a first initial sample made. We just said, okay, that's good enough, and we'll continue to iterate. And we ended up buying 100 advanced samples, I guess is a good way to put it. And those covered the orders that we had in our pre-sale. And then we did a mass production batch after that.
And you went to a different factory for the mass production batch?
Well, so we did the white sample, the 100 advanced samples, those were all at the new factory, yeah.
Got you.
But that all kind of, so it took us about 6 to 8 months to find the first factory, do all the, get all the samples, 4 iterations back and forth, and then did safety testing, only to find out, so sad, too bad, we can't really use them. So then from then, that was like, I think that was September. It was like Labor Day weekend. It was a great Labor Day weekend that I had, because I was like, oh no.
That had to be remarkably discouraging too. A lot of people would have tapped out at that point. Been like, this is a great idea, but I'm a nurse. What do I know about this? I went out to China, tried to do my own thing, and I effed up. It didn't work, right?
I guess, but I mean, for me, I mean, maybe I've always just been too much of a people pleaser. I was like, but I have people counting on me now. Like, I actually have orders to fill. And sure, most of them were people that I knew were friends of friends or acquaintances. So, it very easily would have been like, oh, it's not going to work. But then you have to see those people again. You're going to see those people at like some work event or at, a family function. And it was just like, no, I'm going to deliver. It just didn't even cross my mind not to deliver product to people who had ordered. And yeah, I could have refunded their money, but I don't know. There's something in me that was not going to give up like that. That would have been, I would have had to like slink away and live in a cave or something. I don't know.
Were you going through the whole patent process at this time too?
Well, the patent process started a few years prior. So there's a kind of a long pause within that, because you're kind of waiting for them to review your case and ultimately get back to you. So I can't quite remember the timings on that, but I feel like that was kind of in that wait period, and we weren't taking any action until we were in production for the mass production batch. So that was like this was happening in September, October. And then I think our final advanced samples came at the end of December, right before Christmas. This was in 2015. 2015, and then we were under moving for the mass production, and that was when I went to China for the first time to work with the manufacturer and physically be present to like see what was happening with thousands of units being made. And that was when I started getting news about the patent stuff. So now I'm like halfway across the world hearing about patent things. So it was good that we were on break during the other time for the patent stuff. But yeah.
So once the patent was in order, the safety standards were in order, and you got your initial order, what did you learn about launching a product? Because you had to get a website out there, right? You had to figure out, it's not just your friends anymore that you're trying to sell to, you're trying to actually build a company.
Well, I'm laughing at you a little bit right now because the whole thing that I learned is that you don't really know what you're doing half the time, and it's not really a clear-cut process. It's like you just kind of do the best you can. I wouldn't say half, because you're doing it the best that you can at the time, but you're just kind of throwing something together with as much energy, because there's a million things going on, and as much time and money that you physically have, and then you just end up redoing it. So the only thing that I've learned is that it's never a fixed process, and you're not just, I'm going to do X and I'm going to be done with X, because you're going to do X and then you're going to make X 2.0 and X 3.0 and X 4.0. So yeah, I mean, I learned the amount of things that go into launching a business. I mean, even just you have to have a credit card processor. So you have to have a bank account. You have to have that credit card processor tied to your website. There's a lot of back-end stuff that needs to go on within the website. Getting your website launched, you have a shopping cart within your website as well. There's all sorts of apps that you need to do. You have to work on what's called like search engine optimization. So that's like you have to add tags within pieces of your website. It was literally never ending. It's still never ending. I'm still learning. But I think that's what I'm saying about like, okay, at that time I was like, I don't know, just like I paid somebody to make a website, and it was the best that I could have done at the time. And then we've since revamped it twice since then. And yeah.
So on day one, when the site launches, was it a success right out the gate, or how did that go? Because I know in May you'd been live for quite some time, but you were a little bit dispirited the last time I saw you. You're like, I put all this money into this. I'm still sitting on some inventory. I have to move things to another warehouse. It seemed like the process was getting to you a little bit, and you just needed some sort of boost to get you to the next level and to more people. Yeah.
So I think as an entrepreneur, you think like, I don't know. I guess I didn't assume that things would take off right away, but I was like, well, I made it. Like all I was looking at was like, I'm going to do something. I didn't really quite think of then how I was going to sell it. And the selling it definitely became a challenge. And ultimately I learned that marketing is a really big deal. That's an entire specialty unto itself. And it's really, really, really important. And that ultimately ended up bringing on a co-founder who had marketing experience, ample marketing experience, and is great. And just watching her kind of do what she's good at was like, oh, that's what I was missing last year. But certainly it was kind of a slow build. We didn't actually have a website. A lot of people start with like a landing page and then collect emails, which is a great way to start. We didn't even do that. So we were just like fresh out of the gate, like August of 2015, kind of pre-launching a website and getting pre-orders. And, I think January 2016, was right before our mass production batch arrived. And I was excited to do 10 orders in a month. Like I was like thrilled. And I only knew one person that had ordered of the 10. So I was like, that's a big turnaround from before when it was like, 9 out of 10 that I knew. So I was excited about that. And then February came and we did have a mass production batch. We had 2,000 units. We were, as you said, we were sitting on this inventory, and that first month we sold like 50 or 60 units, which was a huge boost. But to me, I'm like, well, I still have 2,000 left. So, I don't know exactly what I thought I was expecting. But certainly I think it was just my own concept. And I was kind of in my own way, so to speak. But we did just grow month over month, slowly but surely. And then it is kind of like a snowball. So you're like, oh, I did 50 orders this month. I did 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 150, 200, so you're kind of constantly turning over. But yeah, I've learned as a business owner now that every time I come up against an obstacle, it's usually for a good reason. Like when I think back on, thank God we had that issue with that initial factory, because we would have been working with a factory that wasn't
compliant, right?
Compliant, was lying, not a good business partner to have. Similarly, during that kind of initial launch, we didn't go gangbusters. We didn't sell 2,000 units overnight because we weren't ready to. If we had, I probably would have, we would have failed as a business because we just weren't ready to be there. So we had that time to regroup, to find a new warehouse to send our inventory to work with a partner that was ultimately going to be a better fit for us long term. But it's constantly, when you think about little kids or babies, they grow and they grow quickly. And so that's kind of what we're doing. We're still growing. We're still going to be, changing various things here and there. But, it's when I hit a roadblock now, I no longer get really discouraged. I just say, okay, we have downtime now and we can regroup and we can work on that one project that kind of got left behind because we've been so busy with a million other things.
You got involved with a great program last year, which is MassChallenge. Mm-hmm. For listeners who don't know, MassChallenge is a global nonprofit startup accelerator and competition with a focus on high-impact early-stage entrepreneurs. It has a lot of local companies in it, but a ton of global, and it has everything in there from a soothing baby mat to next stage medical adhesives, mm-hmm. Aerospace, actual outer space equipment. So mm-hmm. It's a huge pool of people doing such a wide variety of things. It's almost impossible to judge them completely. But how did you get involved in MassChallenge?
So I was working with, I guess I would call it like a business coach who was really working on removing personal blockages, like how to become a business owner, but because you kind of have to get over your own personal biases about life and that kind of thing. So it was a little bit different focus as opposed to a standard business coach is like, call this person, do that, like here's standard kind of business advice. So I was working with that person and they had some kind of connection to MassChallenge and they said, you should apply. But at the time we had just missed the deadline. So I had never really heard of this thing. And next thing I know, I had it on my calendar and I was like, okay, I'll just apply. Still didn't even really look at like what the entire thing was. Put together an application, had some friends look it over, but knew I needed to be part of this program, but I still didn't even really know what I was getting myself into. And you're right, they have a huge application pool. I think they said for our application pool, 1,700 applicants or something like that. And then they narrow it down to 128 teams that participate in their program, in the Boston program. They also have programs in like Mexico City, Switzerland, London, different times, different places throughout the year. So for that particular program, 128 teams, and then it started in June last summer, and it was essentially like a boot camp. For me, every single day I would show up to the office. They provide you with office space. They also provide mentors. A lot of top companies provide people, that like they mentor for an hour or two or several hours per week, and various experts all throughout, like kind of whatever you want. So if you're like within medical, just thousands of mentors that are accessible to you. And they also have actual like classroom, like speeches, like learning time where you can, you sit down for 2 hours to listen to so-and-so talk about shipping or about this. And so I remember just like showing up that summer pretty much every day. It was like being in school, and every day my head would kind of go, whoa, that's a thing? I'm supposed to know about that? Like, it was my first experience in business. Most people who start a business have some kind of MBA or background in business, and I had none. And so I was like learning things. I can't even think of it right now, but I just remember learning things like, I do remember now actually. So I remember somebody asking me, a mentor at MassChallenge, saying, what's your BOM? BOM. And I just looked at him like he had 10 heads. I don't know what's a BOM. And he's like, it's a bill of materials. And I was like, still don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, like a list of every single thing that goes into your product, like exactly what kind of foam, how much, what type of motors, what type of fabric, what type of computer chip, what type of this, what type of and the cost and where you get it from. And I was like, oh, that's a thing I should have? Of course it was, because he was telling me, where is it? And then he explains like why. And I was like, oh, if I had one of those, that probably would have made a big difference in the last like 6 months. But it was like that kind of stuff where I'm like, oh, these are things that I should know about or should have known about. So I was just learning every day, just like soaking up everything I possibly could. And that ultimately became a huge catalyst for us, because that's how I met my co-founder now, Ashley. She was one of our first mentors at MassChallenge. And I mean, we went on at the end of the program. You continue to pitch throughout the program, and then the 128 teams are up for prize money. So it's 1.5 million. The Boston program was up to 1.5 million in prize money. Not a single team, but like 16 teams split it. But you pitch and kind of pitch and pitch again, and you're kind of pitted up against each other all the time. And we ultimately...
You were one of those teams. You were a
Yes.
gold winner 2016, correct?
Yes.
It's funny because you mentioned that you're kind of ignorant to a lot of this process, but don't you think that's a good thing in some ways? Because if you know how much liability you're about to assume and how difficult this is, if there's a lot of clouds on the mountain and you don't know exactly where the summit is, it's better just to start climbing and get through the clouds and hope you eventually get, because you might not go, right? You might just say,
Yeah.
this is too hard of a road. I'm gonna tank. I'm gonna fail.
What you guys can't hear right now is me shaking my head very vigorously at what he was saying there. Yeah, I said this so many times that if I had any idea what I was getting myself into, I never would have even started, because I would have been so scared of what I was going to face, or I would have just assumed that like, there's no way I can do that. There's no way I can do that. And I think the best part of this process for me wasn't just that I've learned actually how to start a business, run a business, how to sell this product, innovate this product, engineering, importing, all these like actual practical skills that I've learned. But I also, it's like completely changed my outlook on life. You know, when I think, oh, that I can't do that, that's not true at all anymore. I certainly think that I can do anything. It's just a matter of how much time and how much effort, and then do I want to put in that time and effort to do it? You know, that's a very different conversation than there's no way that I can do that. And the confidence build on this process for me has been, certainly I'm like, wow, I did that. I created, you know, I had an idea and I actually followed through and I created prototypes, let alone, you know, launched a business, did this. So it's changed a lot about who I am and how I see the world. So, you know, I invested a lot in this business. I sold my house. I invested, I think at last count was like $200,000 of my own money into this over the course of 2 years with selling the house and everything like that. And there were certain times during that process where I was freaking out a bit, like, oh my, I mean, when you sell your house and you're living with family, you have no place to go.
The chips are in.
The chips are in, and most people would freak out. So I was freaking out. I was like, oh my God, what if this fails? What if this fails? And I don't remember exactly when it was, but I had this like little moment where it was like, oh, but think of all the people who spend that much money to go get an MBA at Harvard and don't have a business at the end of it and don't have half the skills, and not to mention, like I said, the outlook on life, like, you know, that it completely changed how I view what I'm capable of and how to tackle a project. I no longer think that anything is impossible. It's like, oh, I'm sure I can do that. It might take me 20 years to do it a step at a time, but I can do anything. And that is invaluable. Like, it doesn't matter how much money you throw at that. Like, if you can walk away with people who met me at first or people who knew me, I would be like, I have this product and it's kind of like a thing, and you know, and
now you're like, I have this product and it's gonna put your baby to sleep.
Exactly. So it's just a complete, and the body language is different. There's just so many things, and that's priceless.
Well,
to me.
I was watching TV a couple months ago, and one of my favorite shows is the Shark Tank, and I kid you not, I was like Will Ferrell and Elf when they mentioned Santa. I was like, I know her. But when I saw you come out on TV, I couldn't believe it. You looked fabulous on there. You look so confident and amazing. But how did you get on Shark Tank to begin with? What's the process like going on Shark Tank? And you got to deal at the end. I'm going to spoil it here, but you got to deal with my favorite shark, Robert Herjavec, who tends to usually give people what they asked for, or better in your case. And sometimes people still snub him, and it always pisses me off. But you took the deal from him, and he did give you the best deal. But tell us about it. Tell me about Shark Tank.
Okay, so I have to go back to MassChallenge for a hot second, because I was in MassChallenge, I think it was the end of July, and I got an email through our info. You know, we have kind of like a generic catch-all email for the business, and we got an email that was like, hey, I'm a junior producer at Shark Tank. I came across your business. You know, if you're interested in applying for the show, we're doing final casting for season 8. If you're interested in applying for the show, give me a call. When you get that email, you call them. Or, I mean, It depends, but like in my case, it was like, oh, I'm going to call them. So I called them the next day. You know, I can't say for certain whether they knew or heard about me through MassChallenge, but whether that's the case or not, ultimately moving through the application process and feeling confident enough to walk out on stage and be in that room with those sharks all came from the mentoring and the information that I learned at MassChallenge. I mean, you're being asked like, you know, what's your cost to acquire a customer? Like your CAC costs. What are your CAC costs? And I wouldn't have even known what that acronym stood for 2 months prior, or I wouldn't have even known who to talk to or ask about, as opposed to, hey, I've got 3 mentors. Hey, what's a CAC? And then I'd get a little lecture on what a CAC is and how to answer that question. So MassChallenge was absolutely invaluable to my ability to show up on that show and be a businesswoman. And I think in many ways it validated, and that's kind of, I think, how they found me.
They had one team from MassChallenge on, I don't know if it was this season or last season, but they were 2015 gold finalists like yourself. I believe it's called Six Foods, and they made chirpy chips, which were tortilla chips made out of crickets.
Yep.
And I believe they got Cuban.
There have been a few MassChallenge companies actually that have been on the show. There were 2 from last year's batch. PMS Bites is another Boston company, and they make kind of chocolate chocolate like balls that have like specialized like herbs for women to fight PMS. And then they also, can't remember. Pavlok. And it's a wearable that kind of works to, in a way, it like shocks you, like Pavlovian response. Yeah. And they were another MassChallenge team from last year. And they both appeared at the end of season 7. So again, I don't know.
I actually contacted that guy once, and I have no comment. I don't know if you've ever met him, but I have no comment.
I have not met that particular gentleman. I've met other people from his team, and I've seen the device, but I can also not comment.
So, so how was the tournament? You were doing MassChallenge. MassChallenge it was during the summer, right?
Yeah, so it starts at the end of June. It's like July, August, and September, and then October you're still kind of at the program, but it's kind of tapered off a bit, and you're doing more final pitches. We still have office space there now.
But when did you film the tank? Because this season had to be filmed, in December?
So I believe they do like 2 filmings. We were flown out, or I was flown out for September. So I was there in early September. So this was all kind of happening
quick,
at once.
Right?
Yeah, so essentially they have multiple rounds, and like most people will go online and fill out like, it's like a 25-page application. It has to be handwritten, delivered in the mail, that kind of thing. And so, I did that and like a 10-minute audition video. Like I had a week to pull that together. And then there's multiple steps thereafter, and it was like one after, like every time I'd finish some 30-page handwritten application or something, I'd have to like turn around, oh great, you made it to the next round, here's another batch of paperwork. So you have to send like, and you're only sending this to the producers. You're sending this like, I'm actually a business. Here's my, my employee identification number. Here's my bank account statements. Here's this, here's that. And they're looking it over and saying, yes, they're legitimately a business. But the sharks actually have zero contact. They know nothing about you. It's actually one of the very important questions that's asked. Like if you've ever, let's say, tagged a shark on your social media or like had any kind of interaction with them in any other way, you have to disclose that, and it may preclude you from ever being on the show. So yeah, so the sharks, like what you see on TV, they don't know anything about you.
What was it like being on the show? Do you have, is there a dress rehearsal or anything? Or are you just in the green room and you tell the set producer how you want your product to be displayed, and then you just walk out there and pitch?
No, so one of the things you do before you go out there is you do work with a display. Like you work with your producers to come up with the display. This is what I want. This is what's doable. This is what isn't. But you're responsible for all of that. So you have to like show up with all the product, all the things, and then you hand it to them a few days before. And then you do like a dry run kind of like with the producers, like the day or 2 before, but you might never see the sharks. Like they kind of bring you out there and they're like, you may never see them. And even if you go into the tank, you may never air. So you're constantly told like, jump through all these hoops, but it may never amount to anything. So yeah, so they kind of help you put everything together, and you end up going that day. You wait in a trailer until you're called to set. And then you get to set. There is like a small green room on set, or at least there was for me. And then they call you to just look at your display to make sure everything is good. Like, is that exactly how you wanted it? Blah, blah, blah. And you went over this days before, but just to triple check. And the sharks you're in the room. They're right in front of you. They're on their cell phone. They're like getting their hair redone, whatever it is. But you're not allowed to talk to them. And so, yeah, you look at that, and you're like in the room. The lights are on, and then you're told, okay, go. Like, okay, good, you're good. Then go back to the green room, and then you wait until they tell you, and you stand on the other side of the doors, and then it starts.
Come back out and talk to 15 million people. How were you feeling, though, in the green room or even behind that? Were you freaking out?
So I had done a lot of preparation, obviously. Being a nurse, I've been in a lot of very stressful situations, and I do a lot of yoga. So yes, I was freaking out, but by most people's standards, you probably wouldn't have been able to tell. And even by my own standards, consider like in the past, like before I did a lot of yoga, before I was a nurse, like when I was young, I would get so nervous I would like throw up before like a big test. So I wasn't that bad, or I wasn't that nervous. But yeah, I mean, I was definitely like adrenaline running through my veins.
Well, I've read a couple Reddit AMAs about former contestants who've been on Shark Tank, and they basically say that it's not that different from what you see on TV to what actually happens. What I heard is you go out, you stand there for about a minute before you start talking so they can get all the camera angles on you. Mm-hmm. Then you pitch for, 45 minutes or so? 45 minutes to an hour?
Yeah, it depends. So you definitely have that kind of beginning, like, hi, my name's Melissa, I'm from Tranquilo, I'm from Boston, I'm seeking blah, blah, but like that's pre-planned and you kind of have this initial pitch and then they start asking questions. And obviously certain things, if you watch the show enough, like some questions come up all the time.
Sure.
So those are things I prepared for, and those are things like I had spoken with other people who had been on the show, like, well, what did you experience? What would you do? What would you know? And I was pretty much told, like, know your numbers inside and out. So I had prepped, I mean, we're talking like backwards and forwards, but yeah, you walk through the doors and you do wait like about a minute. I think they say it's 30 seconds, but it feels like an eternity.
Sure.
So somebody actually gave me a great bit of advice. Tanya of PMS Bites said, think of something to do during that time. So she said, make eye contact with each of the sharks, smile at them, run through your head, think positive thoughts like, I'm going to make a deal with Cuban, or I'm going to make it, you're just mentally just like being prepared for that time. And then you start your pitch. And actually for me, I was so focused on what I had to do that I finished my pitch and I was like, and I just stood there at the end, like totally blank. And then I think the thing that was great for me was that the sharks are like, at least how it seemed, they were so nice. Yeah. So I'm standing there like,
even Mr. Wonderful?
I thought so.
Yeah. No, I like him. He seems to get a bad rap, but he's kind of like a throwback to like Simon Cowell was. He's the kind of brutally honest voice of the show.
Yeah. I teased him obviously at the end.
Yeah, you did.
I mean, that's based. I'm a people person. I feel like I can read people pretty well. Being a nurse, like I said, you're in tough situations. You meet random patients all the time. You're like, I'm in a labor room with people at the worst time of their lives, or maybe not worst, but like the most stressful time of their lives. And I have to read that room properly. So, I mean, I teased him because that was kind of the vibe I got from him, was that he was going to be totally okay with it. But yeah, no, I mean, Kevin, they were all great. They were all just so nice. And so I remember just standing there after that first couple minute pitch, and I was just like, and my brain, I could not think of anything. And then Robert was like, so do you have samples for us? And I was like, oh, yes. Samples, great. And that was when I remembered what my next step was. And then from there, once it was like them asking questions, it was pretty easy. Or not pretty easy, but like I was focused on answering the actual questions. So.
Well, you got 3 deals too. You got Damon, who he wanted twice as much as your company as you were asking, right? So he doubled his equity.
Yeah.
You probably weren't too psyched about that one. O'Leary came in, and he was going to give you the equity that you asked for, but he wanted a quarter of your company.
Right.
It's a lot to swallow, especially because you just brought on another founder, right?
So at the time we hadn't signed paperwork, but yeah, we had been in pretty serious discussions. So I knew that was a possibility. Yeah. So I was essentially going to be down to less than 50% of my company if I took O'Leary's deal. So yeah, so I had Damon's deal. I mean, again, Damon's a nice guy, and we had even gone through, like, my mentors and I, if you watch the show enough, you kind of get an idea. I was prepped for like, Damon somebody will want to license it. What will you say if they want to license it? And I knew if somebody had asked me to license it 5 years ago, I probably would have said sure, or even 2 years ago. But now, I was like, no, I'm not going to license my product. And then, I think Kevin kind of surprised me with his deal. And that, him coming in with $250,000 for 25% was like, oh, wait, that's way more money than I was asking for. And he's usually the tough one. Yeah. So that kind of led me to believe I might have some wiggle room. And that was when I just really wanted to know what the other sharks had to say. And of course they cut it for TV and all this stuff. And I was just really, and I would have taken Kevin's deal. I really didn't want to take the 25% though. I would have taken, if he then countered with 200,000 for 20%, because I said, okay, fine. If somebody can do 150,000 for 15%, then I'll do it.
And Hirschevek did that. So how soon after the show is Hirschevek doing his due diligence, and are you guys sitting at a table?
Yeah, so the due diligence process started, I would say a couple weeks after the show, because he was still filming. He was still out there. So like his team had reached out to us and said, we'll get back to you in a couple weeks when he's back.
When all the deals are done and they can kind of make a schedule of who to contact.
Correct. Yeah. So then we got the packet. I think it was right before Christmas, like that we submitted this, another like crazy, it was pretty much what we did for Shark Tank for the producers, but more so because it was like, well, that was a couple months ago now. And so it was like right before Christmas that we're putting together this enormous packet of stuff, and then phone calls back and forth after that to be able to try to close a deal and just finalize things. So it's quite a process for sure to close, because that first packet, like just before Christmas, was when they were trying to determine like, is this, do we want to continue to move forward? And that was the first time they had really seen our company besides what I had said and what people had seen on the show.
Yeah. I know you have a call time coming pretty quick. So real quick lightning round, just a couple questions that
Sure.
I still want to get out. So you get in touch with Hirschevek's team. How much are you talking to them now?
So we usually use them just as like a point person, like, oh, we have this question, what are your thoughts? Or, hey, do you have a connection here? It's not really, they're not hands-on. They're not like in the business day to day. It's not like we have calls every week, so.
The Shark Tank effect. So the show airs. How drastically did your web traffic change, and how did your orders go up?
I can't speak to the web traffic because I'm not that kind of nerd on my business.
Yeah.
Ashley probably could, but we were told to prepare for 1 year's worth of inventory. For us, that was 2,000 units. We had done 2,000 units from February of 2016 to February of 2017, and we aired on the 10th of February. So we ordered another 2,000 units fresh, ready to go for the show. We sold out of those within less than 24 hours. So the largest, we had ordered 1,200. We sold out of those before the West Coast even saw the show, which is 3 hours after the East Coast aired. And then the remaining small units, the 800 of those, were gone by like noon the next day, Saturday.
So you have a new problem. You have this Shark Tank thing. So now you have an inventory problem. You're almost too successful, too quick, because you had one of the greatest infomercials you can have in America is even being on Shark Tank,
Yep.
even if you don't get a deal. So you just got back from China.
Yep.
Did you fly United?
I did not know. I just came back again. We just had 4,000 units that we produced that are on their way. So pray to the shipping gods, please. They arrive safely and get to our warehouse very soon, hopefully by the end of the week before the holiday weekend. And those will go out to our awaiting customers. And then we have another 4,000 that are in progress, but it's more staggered. So we have 2 shipment batches. There's this one, and then we have another batch going out in May.
If our listeners want to purchase a Tranquilo mat or a Tranquilo mat,
Yep.
because I know you have your call to take, how can they get in touch with you? How can they reach you? How can they buy one? And is stock's coming back soon?
Yep. So we'll be back in stock officially very beginning of May. So just a couple weeks, like 2 weeks. We have another 2,000 units on their way, filling a couple more pre-orders. And then, we will officially be in stock. And you can purchase on our website. So actually the best way is to purchase on our website, pre-order now, so that you will get in line for the shipment. And it's www.tranquilo, TRANQUILO, mat.com. So Tranquilo, like tranquil with an O, mat.com. And you can order, we have both a small size and a large size. The large is our most popular, about 80% of our customers purchase that. And that's mostly for use in cribs, bassinets, pack and plays in the home setting. And then the small size is more for your car seats, your baby carriers, holding your baby, that kind of thing. More of an on-the-go type model. So definitely, if people are interested, head to our website and pre-order one now, so you're going to get one when we're back in stock in May. And there's also contact information on there too, so you can fill out the contact form and either reach me or anybody else with your questions about the product. Or
I'll put a link to it in the show notes too.
Great.
So if you just check the show notes on there, you go on iTunes, there'll be a link to her website and you can go check that out.
Great.
For me, if you just want to give back to the show, please go on iTunes, rate and review. We also have our Patreon up, patreon.com/theshippingpod. You can support the show directly through that way. We do have our first supporter. I just have to give a shout out to Jessica Hillier at LaSaint Logistics. She can design and deliver a mix of bundled and unbundled services to create a complete, integrated, and effective supply chain system for you. Put LaSaint know-how to work for your business and see the difference their knowledge can make to reach her, JHILLYER at LESAINT.com, jhillier@lesaint.com. Thank you so much for your time today, Melissa. We'll have to catch up a little bit down the road too when you're on your next stage and you've developed even more products.
Sounds good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.
For Melissa Gersin,
I'm Tim Dooner, saying so long. On the shipping pod. I didn't mean to make you cry. I saw those tears come out your eyes. But you know, things don't always go the way you want them to. And you know, I'll do anything to keep being with you. Baby, don't you cry. Don't wanna see until you know that. Baby, don't you cry.